We live in an era that aggressively worships transparency. From the high-stakes boardrooms of Manhattan to the hyper-connected startup incubators of Silicon Valley, and all the way down to the daily feeds of our social media, we are constantly force-fed a single, overwhelming narrative: you must speak your truth. We are told that vulnerability is the ultimate virtue, that sharing our deepest thoughts, our fleeting emotions, and our financial aspirations will somehow lead to authentic connections and inevitable success. So, we open our mouths. We reveal our hands. We let our moods dictate our actions in real time, and we spend our money in ways that signal to the world exactly who we think we are. And yet, for the vast majority of people following this modern blueprint, the result is not freedom. The result is a quiet, suffocating sense of being trapped. You work 50, maybe 60 hours a week, climbing a corporate ladder or building a small business, only to find that you are constantly outmaneuvered by people who seem less talented but far more strategic. You experience the crushing anxiety of realizing that a single emotional outburst, a careless comment in a Monday morning meeting, or a poorly timed financial decision has set you back years. You look around the American landscape, a place built on the promise of upward mobility, and you realize you are merely surviving, playing a game whose rules you never fully understood. This is because the world does not operate on the idealistic principles we are taught in school. The world operates on leverage, perception, and human nature. And no one in human history understood the raw, unfiltered mechanics of human nature better than a 16th-century diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli. For 500 years, his name has been synonymous with manipulation, deceit, and ruthlessness. To call someone Machiavellian in modern American society is an insult, a way of labeling them as a cold-blooded villain. But this is a profound misunderstanding, a deliberate distortion by those who already hold power and prefer that you do not learn how to acquire it. Machiavelli was not writing a manual for tyrants. He was writing a survival guide for the vulnerable. He was a realist living in a brutal, unpredictable world, and he understood that wishing for the world to be fair will only guarantee your destruction. If you do not learn to manage your mouth, your mind, your moods, and your money, society will gladly manage them for you, and always to your detriment. Let us begin with the mouth. In modern corporate America, the concept of open communication is often a trap. You sit down for a performance review, or a casual coffee chat with a manager, and you are encouraged to share your frustrations, your grand ambitions, or your personal struggles. The natural human instinct is to reciprocate this feigned intimacy. You talk too much. You reveal that you are desperate for a raise because of a mortgage in the suburbs, or you admit that you are intimidated by a particular project. In that brief moment of oversharing, you feel a sense of relief. But the reality is that you have just handed over the keys to your own psychological fortress. You have given them leverage. Machiavelli observed that men are so simple, and so governed by their immediate needs, that a person who wishes to deceive will always find someone willing to be deceived. When you talk too much, you are constantly feeding the world data about your insecurities and your desires. People who talk incessantly make themselves predictable, and in any competitive environment, predictability is a fatal weakness. The person who speaks least in a negotiation, or in a boardroom, holds the most power. Silence creates an uncomfortable vacuum that others will inevitably rush to fill, usually by revealing their own weaknesses or making concessions. Managing your mouth is the first line of defense. It means mastering the art of strategic ambiguity. It means understanding that your words are your most valuable currency, and inflating the supply of that currency only diminishes its worth. But controlling your mouth is impossible if you do not first conquer your mind. The American mind is currently suffering from a massive epidemic of cognitive dissonance. We are raised on a diet of meritocracy, the unwavering belief that if you just keep your head down, work hard, and play by the rules, you will be rewarded. This is the great American dream, and it is a beautiful ideal. But when the reality of life strikes, when you are passed over for a promotion by someone who plays office politics, or when a sudden economic downturn wipes out your industry, the mind fractures. You become cynical, bitter, and paralyzed by the unfairness of it all. This is where Machiavellian wisdom becomes an absolute necessity. Machiavelli forces us to separate what ought to be from what actually is. He wrote that how we live is so different from how we ought to live, that he who studies what ought to be done rather than what is done will learn the way to his downfall rather than to his preservation. To manage your mind is to radically accept reality without letting it destroy your spirit. It requires you to look at the people around you, your colleagues, your competitors, your leaders, not as you wish they were, but exactly as they are. Human beings are driven by self-interest, fear, and a desire for status. Once your mind accepts this cold truth, you stop being a victim of circumstance. You stop complaining about the unfairness of the game and start learning how to play it. A sharp, managed mind anticipates betrayal, expects self-interest, and remains completely unbothered by it. It calculates risk with terrifying clarity. However, a sharp mind is utterly useless if it is hijacked by a turbulent mood. In the current attention economy, your emotions are literally a billion-dollar commodity. Every algorithm, every news cycle, every political debate in the United States is meticulously engineered to trigger your outrage, your anxiety, or your tribal instincts. When you lose your temper, when you react defensively to an email, or when you let anxiety dictate your daily choices, you are acting as a puppet for someone else's agenda. Machiavelli deeply understood the danger of emotional volatility. A leader, or any individual seeking agency over their own life, cannot afford the luxury of uncontrolled passion. Moods are weather systems, they will pass. But the decisions you make while under the influence of those moods will leave permanent scars. Think of the countless careers destroyed by a single angry tweet, or the fortunes lost in the stock market because retail investors panicked during a dip. Managing your mood is not about suppressing your humanity, it is about cultivating a ruthless internal discipline. It is the ability to feel the surge of anger or the sting of humiliation, and then deliberately choose to respond with cold, calculated grace. The person who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled. And finally, there is the ultimate tool of earthly leverage, money. In a society driven by consumption, money is almost exclusively viewed as a means to purchase status. We buy cars we cannot afford to impress people we do not like, trapping ourselves in a cycle of debt that forces us to remain in jobs we despise. This is a profound violation of Machiavellian logic. To Machiavelli, resources were not for showing off, they were for building fortresses. They were the physical manifestation of freedom and security. If you live paycheck to paycheck, no matter how high your salary is, you have no leverage. You are completely dependent on the goodwill of your employer and the stability of the broader economy. You are at the mercy of fortune. Managing your money, in the truest Machiavellian sense, is about aggressively acquiring the capital necessary to say no. It is about building a war chest so that when the inevitable crisis arrives, or when an extraordinary opportunity presents itself, you have the means to act decisively. Money is not just currency, it is the physical space between you and ruin. It is the armor that protects you from the unpredictable chaos of the world. So, how do we transition from being the victims of these four pillars to becoming their masters? How do we stop bleeding out our words, our mental energy, our emotional stability, and our financial resources? The answer lies in understanding the deep, hidden mechanisms of how these forces interact in our daily lives, and the psychological laws that govern them. To understand why we so easily surrender our power, we must look under the hood of human biology and modern American engineering. Let us start by dissecting the mechanics of the mouth. Why do we overshare? Why is it so difficult to remain silent in a boardroom in Chicago or a networking event in Silicon Valley? The answer is neurochemical. Researchers at Harvard University's Department of Psychology conducted a landmark study using functional magnetic resonance imaging. They discovered that disclosing information about oneself strongly stimulates the brain's mesolimbic dopamine system, the exact same reward pathway that lights up when we consume sugar, receive money, or experience physical pleasure. Speaking about our own beliefs, struggles, and desires literally produces a neurological high. Modern corporate infrastructure is acutely aware of this biological vulnerability. The modern HR department, the ubiquitous open-door policy, the weekly check-ins, these are not mechanisms designed for your emotional well-being, they are intelligence-gathering operations. They rely on the disclosure intimacy illusion, a psychological phenomenon where we mistakenly believe that by sharing our vulnerabilities, we are building mutual loyalty. In reality, you are simply handing over asymmetrical information. In the ruthless arena of corporate America, information asymmetry is the ultimate advantage. When you complain about a difficult client to a colleague, or reveal your absolute minimum acceptable salary during a negotiation, you have just laid your cards face up on the table. Machiavelli recognized this fatal flaw in human nature centuries ago. He observed that humans are inherently treacherous when their own survival is on the line. By keeping your mouth shut, you maintain a fog of war around your intentions. Silence is not just the absence of speech, it is an active, aggressive shield. It forces your opponents to project their own insecurities into the void you have created, often leading them to negotiate against themselves. But to control the biological urge to speak, you must first secure the fortress of your mind. The American mindset is uniquely fragile because it has been systematically conditioned by the just world fallacy. This is a cognitive bias deeply embedded in the American dream, the assumption that good actions are naturally rewarded and bad actions are punished, that merit alone dictates success. We are taught to be honest, hard-working players in a fair game. However, extensive research from institutions like Princeton and Yale mapping socio-economic mobility tells a very different story. Success is heavily dictated by networking, ruthless pragmatism, and systemic leverage. When the average American worker encounters the harsh reality of this system, when the promotion goes to the smooth-talking nepotism hire rather than the hardest worker, the mind experiences violent cognitive dissonance. This is the precise moment where people break. They become cynical, they burn out, or they resign in quiet desperation. Machiavelli offers the cure for this mental fragility through his concepts of sfortuna and virtù. Fortuna is the unpredictable, often cruel river of circumstance, market crashes, corporate layoffs, sudden illness. Virtù is not moral virtue, it is the cunning, strength, and adaptability required to build dams against that river. To manage your mind means to violently strip away the just world fallacy. It means accepting that the boardroom is a political battlefield, not a meritocratic utopia. Once you expect betrayal, self-interest, and unfairness as standard operating procedures, you can no longer be blindsided by them. A managed mind operates with cold calculus, viewing human behavior as a series of predictable algorithms driven by self-interest, completely detached from the childish expectation of fairness. Yet, this cold calculus is instantly incinerated the moment you lose control of your mood. We live in an attention economy that has weaponized emotional contagion. The algorithms of every major tech company in the United States are designed with one primary objective: to trigger your amygdala, the primitive part of the brain responsible for the fight-or-flight response. A famous MIT study analyzed a decade of social media data and found that false, anger-inducing news spread 6 times faster than the truth. Outrage is the most profitable commodity on Wall Street. When you allow your mood to be hijacked by a political headline, an aggressive email from your boss, or a passive-aggressive comment from a peer, you are surrendering your autonomy. You are allowing your internal chemistry to be remote-controlled by external forces seeking to monetize your reaction. Machiavelli wrote extensively on the necessity of the fox and the lion. The lion uses brute force, but the fox recognizes traps. Reacting with immediate anger is the clumsy roar of the lion. It reveals your position and exhausts your energy. The fox, however, masters emotional regulation. Managing your mood requires the implementation of a psychological firewall. It is the practice of creating a microsecond of pause between a stimulus and your response. In that pause lies your absolute freedom. A Machiavellian operator feels the anger, observes it objectively, and then decides whether deploying that anger serves their strategic objective. If it does not, the emotion is discarded. You must become a master of simulation and dissimulation, appearing calm when you are terrified, and appearing enraged only when it is a calculated performance to establish boundaries. Finally, we arrive at the physical manifestation of all this leverage of money. The modern American financial system is designed to keep you in a state of perpetual, anxious dependence. We have normalized a culture of indentured servitude dressed up as luxury. The Federal Reserve consistently reports trillions of dollars in revolving consumer debt. The psychological trap here is the consumption of Veblen goods, products whose demand increases as their price increases, serving no functional purpose other than signaling status. We mortgage our futures to buy depreciating assets to impress people operating on the exact same flawed operating system. Machiavelli had a deep disdain for relying on mercenary armies. He argued that mercenaries are expensive, disloyal, and will abandon you the moment the battle turns against you. In the modern context, your credit cards, your auto loans, and your sole reliance on a W-2 salary are your mercenaries. When an economic recession hits, they will turn on you, consuming your resources and leaving you defenseless. Managing your money the Machiavellian way means recognizing that every dollar spent on status is a soldier lost in the battle for your freedom. Wealth is not about what you drive. Wealth is the invisible accumulation of capital that buys you the most powerful word in the English language, no. It is the FU money that allows you to walk away from a toxic manager, a bad deal, or a manipulative relationship without the fear of starvation. It is the transformation of money from a tool of vanity into a tool of sovereign power. We have mapped the traps. We see how our mouths betray us, how our minds are conditioned to fail, how our moods are harvested for profit, and how our money is siphoned away to keep us compliant. The architecture of our subjugation is clear. The question now is not just how to defend against it, but how to actively reverse engineer this system. How do we take these 4 pillars and forge them into an unbreakable personal empire? The transformation from prey to predator, or rather, from a pawn to a sovereign player in this modern game, begins with the tactical mastery of the mouth. You must adopt what master negotiators and intelligence officers call the rule of asymmetrical silence. From tomorrow morning, whenever you enter a room, a Zoom call, or a negotiation, your default state must be observation, not participation. When a colleague or a manager asks you a seemingly innocent but probing question about your future plans or your frustrations, you do not answer with your truth. You utilize the return and pivot technique. You offer a vague, polite pleasantry, and immediately deflect the focus back onto them or the operational task at hand. If they ask, "How are you handling the stress of this new project?" you do not confess your anxiety. You say, "It is an interesting challenge. What is your perspective on the new timeline?" People are so enamored with the sound of their own voices, and so eager for the dopamine hit of oversharing, that they will gladly take the bait. By speaking 30% of the time and listening 70%, you become a human black hole, absorbing intelligence without emitting any light. You create an aura of unpredictability. When you finally do speak, your words will carry the weight of scarcity. Machiavelli understood that to command respect, you must be inscrutable. Your silence is not a sign of weakness or ignorance, it is a calculated fortress that forces others to constantly second-guess their position. Simultaneously, you must completely re-engineer the operating system of your mind. We must perform a violent extraction of the just world fallacy and replace it with radical realism. To manage your mind effectively, you must stop operating on how you wish the world worked and start navigating it exactly as it is. This means stripping away the emotional weight you attach to the actions of others. When a coworker takes credit for your idea, or a business partner tries to undercut you, do not waste a single ounce of mental energy on moral indignation. Do not ask, "How could they do this?" That is the lament of the weak. Instead, you must ask, what is their incentive? By viewing the people around you as rational actors maximizing their own self-interest, their behavior becomes predictable data rather than a personal betrayal. This is the essence of Machiavellian virtue, the mental agility to adapt to any circumstance without being broken by it. You build mental armor by actively anticipating worst-case scenarios, a Stoic practice known as negative visualization. If you have already played out the betrayal in your mind, if you have already calculated your counter-move before the attack even happens, you can never be blindsided. Your mind becomes a sterile, highly efficient control room, completely insulated from the toxic drama of the modern workplace. But this sterile control room must be fiercely protected from the volatile weather of your moods. To master your mood, you must master the space between stimulus and response. The next time you feel the hot flush of anger rising in your chest because of an insulting email or a perceived slight, you must employ cognitive decoupling. Imagine stepping out of your physical body and observing yourself from the corner of the room. Acknowledge the emotion, "I am experiencing anger," but do not identify with it. Do not say, "I am angry." The moment you detach your identity from the emotion loses its power to dictate your physical actions. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. The thermometer simply reacts to the temperature of the room, going up and down based on the environment. The thermostat dictates the temperature. Let your opponent be the thermometer. Let them lose their temper, let them send the emotional emails, let them expose their insecurities. You will remain the thermostat. If you choose to display anger, it will not be a loss of control, it will be a carefully calculated theatrical performance designed to establish a boundary or intimidate an opponent. Real power is the ability to smile warmly at someone who is trying to destroy you, knowing you have already outmaneuvered them. Finally, we must weaponize our money. If money is the ultimate physical manifestation of leverage, then the Machiavellian approach to finance is stealth wealth. You must actively reject the American trap of using debt to finance the illusion of status. You must stop buying depreciating assets to signal your worth to people who secretly want you to fail. Instead, every dollar you earn must be viewed as a brick in your personal fortress. You are not saving for retirement, you are buying optionality. You are buying the most intoxicating luxury on the planet, the freedom to walk away. This requires a ruthless reduction in your visible lifestyle. Drive the reliable, unassuming car. Live in the house that costs significantly less than what the bank says you can afford. Let your colleagues wear the Rolexes and finance the luxury SUVs, trapping themselves in the golden handcuffs of corporate servitude. You will operate in the shadows, quietly accumulating liquid capital, index funds, and cash reserves. When the inevitable economic downturn arrives, when the company downsizes, or when a massive opportunity presents itself, the people who prioritize status will panic. They will be at the mercy of Sfortuna. You, however, will have the capital to strike. Your wealth will be invisible to the world, but intimately felt by you as a deep, unshakable peace of mind. This is the true legacy of Machiavelli. It is not about becoming a villain, a sociopath, or a tyrant. It is about waking up from the collective delusion of modern society. It is about recognizing that you are playing a high-stakes game, whether you want to or not. If you do not actively manage your mouth, your mind, your moods, and your money, the corporate machine, the algorithms, and the predatory systems of this world will gladly manage them for you. They will extract your data, harvest your attention, exploit your labor, and drain your wealth. But by embracing the cold, beautiful clarity of radical realism, you reclaim your sovereignty. You become untouchable. You learn to move quietly through the world, speaking only when necessary, thinking with absolute precision, acting with unshakable composure, and building a financial fortress that no one can breach. You stop being a character in someone else's story, and you finally become the author of your own. Thank you for walking down this path of clarity and truth with me today. If this perspective shifted something within you, if it gave you the tools to see the world a little more clearly, I invite you to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We are building a community of sovereign minds here, and your voice is a valued part of that journey. Until next time, keep your mind sharp, your vision clear, and always remember to stay grounded. This is Lucid Soma, signing off.